What does it mean to call Christ King? Kingdoms are an odd notion to us. Few use this mode of government anymore, and our fascination with the royals, which honestly funds the trash magazine industry, aside, who does that baby really look like? Is Charles upset with his mother because she wants him to walk the corgis? Is Camilla really a monster? Well, no one in a free society really wants someone telling them when to jump, why to jump, and how high. So, we have to remember that kingdoms were built around the concept that in the king, the country was manifested. The king was the symbol of the country. So absolute loyalty to the king was demanded because, frankly, there would be times when the life of the country depended upon it. There was no separation between loyalty to the king and patriotism. They were one and the same. So to hail one as king meant to commit to that person in totality. For in that person, at least symbolically, rested the fate of the country and all that the country was meant to be. But what does it mean when the one who is called king is a symbol of a life poured out for others? What does it mean when the one who is called king would not take a place to call home, but rather travel from place to place, healing the sick and feeding the hungry and preaching the good news of God's reign of love? What does it mean when that king offered no resistance to his oppressor, but rather took on a crown of thorns and made the cross his throne? It means a lot of things. For one, it means that what I want must often become secondary. Jesus was not into a lot of self-denial. Yes, he used that in his religious practices, of course, like when he was fasting during the temptation. But the criticism launched at Jesus from other religious leaders of the time shows us that Jesus could enjoy a good meal. He could enjoy a good party. Jesus lived a life of balance. But even when he was enjoying himself, the theme of living for others was never left behind. And it is impossible to live a life for others if you're always concerned about what you want. So, making Jesus king in your life means remembering that you are always called to care for all those other kids around you in the lunchroom, all those folks in the cubicles that surround you, the hungry in your town, that shut-in person who just needs a visit once in a while and a kind word. It means taking life and mixing the pleasures you get to experience in life with service. And making that service intentional, not just something you do when you find you have some leftover time. That's nice, it's a good thing to do, but it's always better when we seek to make our service to God intentional. What else does it mean to call Jesus king? Well, it means when you look at the direction of your life, the call of the gospel should have an influence over your idea of where you want your life to go. Tony Campolo has this great, if sad, story about a kid he took on a mission trip. They went to this place that was really destitute. There was a lot of need, there was a lot of poverty, and there was especially a lot of medical need. And this kid decided on that trip he was going to be a doctor. He was going to be a doctor because he realized if he was a doctor, one day he could come back to a place like this and offer medical help. And he became a doctor. And then he became a surgeon. And then he became a plastic surgeon large cosmetic practice in New York City. And years later, he met Tony Campolo again, and he told him of his work, which I don't think included a lot of trips to third world countries to fix cleft palates. And Tony Campolo can get in your face a little bit. He can tell you things you don't want to hear. And he said to him, you became a doctor so that you could offer help to the poor, and you have traded that dream that God gave you to reinforce in women the idea that according to the standards of a sick society, they are physically inadequate. If I'm going to call Christ king, that statement should impact the direction I want to take in my life. And if I'm going to call Christ king, I better be thinking about the gospel when I get my paycheck. I hope you all got a chance to see the video that I sent out there this week. And if not, I hope that you will be kind enough to watch it. And nobody wants to harp about money all the time. But you know what? Jesus talked about money almost more than anything else. And when you ask, why did he do that? Well, think of the old saying, where your treasure lies, there your heart lies also. We need to prayerfully consider what we should be giving to the work of God, and then we need to give first, not out of the leftovers, first to the work of God. And it doesn't all have to go to the church. Not everything I give goes to the church, but it should go to gospel work, work that is helping to bring compassionate care to a hurting world. And unless we're in real need, and I don't think Christ is calling the poor or those who are really in need to give up what they need to survive. Unless we're in real need, we all should be helping to shoulder the burden. We should give first out of what we've been given and give regularly. And that means, of course, we start with less, right? You give first, you start with less. But you know what? When you start with less, you learn how to live with less, and you have the joy in your heart of knowing you've done your part. I think the gospel is really a call, in many ways, to give up personal gain of all kinds. It's a call to take that mantle of selfishness we wear and toss it aside. And that's not easy. Let's not kid ourselves. It's not. I think selfishness is what became of the instinct to survive on that day when we realized we really had enough to eat and we didn't have to run away from bears anymore. Because think about it. When you've got enough food, or rather when your life is consumed with getting food and not getting eaten, well, things are pretty simple. You grab what's in front of you for you and yours, and that's it. The problem is we're programmed to keep grabbing even when our needs have been met. And while the comforts we know were certainly not available in the time of Christ, certainly not to the masses that Jesus was working with, things really aren't very different. The crowds hailed him as king on that day we call Palm Sunday. But for the vast majority of those people, this was a prelude to violence. You see, Jesus, like Jeremiah in our Old Testament, was counseling love of the neighbor, care of the neighbor. Let God take care of this matter of freedom. But for those crowds, they were seeing a violent overthrow of their oppressors and a reclaiming of the riches that had been denied them. The Romans and the Jews who did not know Jesus could not buy the idea that this fellow was really serious about a reign of peace and love. The Romans, frankly, had a policy that any large gathering would become a violent gathering. And that policy is pretty much what sent Jesus to the cross. You see, the Romans saw no alternative but violence. And they weren't taking any chances. They were not going to lose their riches and their power. Selfishness is ingrained in us. I know I've got my fair share. And it's tough when you look at that and you realize the call of the gospel is to shed that and follow. But the beauty of the call of Christ is that when we do the work of the gospel, when we nurture, when we heal, when we feed, when we love and care for others, Christ is there. Christ is resurrected among us. We're all hooked on grabbing for what we want, but Jesus gives us a chance to get hooked on something else, to get hooked on the presence of the kingdom in our midst when we do this work. And when we do this work, the Spirit fills us. The Spirit lifts us up. And we can see that we're really part of something much bigger than ourselves. And that our dreams can be linked to that dream of God, that dream of a peaceable kingdom. So yes, let us bow. Let us proclaim Him King. And let that proclamation guide our lives. Jesus is King. May God reign in us. And when people look at us, may they say of us what they said of those first Christians. Look at how these Christians